the not-too-distant past. An epidemic of horror failures. Millions cry, chaos. Out of the tragedy, a goth savior emerges. Repo, the genetic opera. Before we get started, make sure that you subscribe to this channel and click that little bell thingy to get notified. I post regular movie reviews and gameplays, all with a horror theme to them. So trust me when I say that you won't want to miss what's coming. Don't believe me? Stick around to the end of the episode to find out what movie I'll be discussing next time. Now, the very first time that something resembling Repo the Genetic Opera appeared on the scene, it was a play called The Necro Merchant's Debt, which premiered at the John Raitt Theatre in 2002. It followed a grave robber, which in the Repo universe is basically a drug dealer, who was in debt to a repo man, or someone employed under the GeneCo company, which basically runs the world in this universe. It's the repo man's job to repossess human organs bought from the GeneCo company, because all of this takes place in a futuristic universe where organ failures are common and people rely on GeneCo in order to survive. This also means that if the grave robber is caught by the repo man, then he will be cut open and have his organs ripped out of his body, usually while he's still alive. You might be able to see how that would be a bad thing, but all of this is perfectly legal in this universe because, as I said, GeneCo runs the world. They can decide the rules because people depend on them too much to care. When The Necro Merchant's Debt proved a success, creators Darren Smith and Terence Zudinich decided to expand the universe with another play, Repo, the Genetic Opera. Although that show premiered in 2002 and continued to be performed right up to 2005, the plot was hardly what you'd call stagnant. Changes kept being made to the plot and characters. For instance, when the play first premiered, Rotti Largo, the owner of GeneCo, was younger brother to Pavi and Lucci Largo, and Heather Sweet was Lucci's daughter. But at some point, all of this changed so that Rotti was the patriarch, with Pavi, Luigi, and Amber Sweet being his disappointing trust fund children. But what happened in 2005 that took the play off the stage? Well, one of the play's previous directors, Darren Lynn Bousman, suddenly found a great deal of success when he was asked to direct a little-known project called Saw 2. Bousman took advantage of his newfound connections and finances to promote Repo the Genetic Opera, turning it into a 10-minute short that starred Shawnee Smith as Amber Sweet, Michael Rooker as the Repo Man, and Terence Zudinich as the grave robber. I tried to find the short online, but it appears to be very obscure. More than anything, that short was used to pitch the story to Lionsgate in the hopes that they'd pick it up as a theatrical release. And as it turns out, they did! Repo the Genetic Opera was turned into a film, which is hugely exciting. Sure, if it wasn't for the fact that they were given a microscopic budget, told that they were only allowed to use 20 extras, and they had to recast everyone except for Terence Zudinich. That being said, the final cast they ended up with is actually pretty amazing. Most notably, we have Sarah Brightman in her first film appearance, Anthony Stewart Head of Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame as the Repo Man, Bill Moseley playing Luigi Largo. Hey there, man, you've been appearing on my channel quite a bit. Welcome back. And we've got Paris Hilton playing Amber Sweet. You heard right, folks, Paris Hilton. And this movie was released in 2008. Oh boy. Apparently, Bousman was incredibly resistant to allowing Paris Hilton to even audition, because he was afraid of the backlash the film might get if he did. But Hilton eventually talked him into an audition, and when he saw her, he couldn't imagine anyone else in the role. And look, I'm not gonna sit here and say that Paris Hilton was the best choice. But considering the girl won a Golden Raspberry for Worst Supporting Actress because of this movie, I really don't think she did that bad. I mean, she's playing a spoiled heiress with a skewed perspective of the world because she was raised into money. This is the best example of write what you know that I've ever seen. Act what you know? Whatever. You know what I mean. And you can't deny that she was at least passionate about getting the movie made. When it became clear that production would have to halt due to the previously mentioned microscopic budget, Hilton went out of her way to finance the rest of the movie despite not being credited as a producer. There's only one problem with Paris Hilton in this role. She really cannot sing.
I've never been so surgically made.
And this movie isn't just a musical, it's an opera. Which means that there are maybe 1 or 2 lines of spoken dialogue, but the rest is all singing. This is handled with varying degrees of effectiveness throughout the movie. The songs themselves are pretty great. It's a rock opera, so all the songs are pretty loud, but the moments in between what you'd call traditional songs, there's just this lullaby-like theme that plays while the character speaks in their lines. Which is fine, you know, for the characters that can actually sing. Most of them are pretty decent, but the guy who plays Rossi Largo is just as bad as Paris Hilton, and they have a whole song together, and oh my god, is this the most draining part of the movie.
Baby, 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 don't do this.
I will never sing again.
Bill Moseley too. As much as I love him, you can really tell that the only reason he was cast in a musical was to lend his name to the credits.
I'm the smartest and the toughest. I will find a hole and fuck it.
But for the most part, it's fine because his character is supposed to have anger issues, so he just kind of yells all of his lines, and you know what? It's fine. This is fine. But let's talk about that plot. What is Repo the Genetic Opera about? Now that I've name dropped about 50 characters, and trust me, there are more to come. Okay, so the protagonist is a teenage girl named Shiloh. She spends her whole life locked up in her bedroom under the care of her overprotective father, having inherited a blood disease from her deceased mother. One night, Shiloh sneaks out of the house only to meet Rossi Largo, the owner of the Gene Co. company, who has recently learned that he's dying, and he doesn't know who to leave his company to. He has 3 adult children, sure, but he doesn't feel that any of them are suited to the job. And upon meeting Shiloh, he decides to leave the company to her. But in order to do this, he must first get her father out of the way. And also, Shiloh's father is secretly a repo man. And also there's some sort of backstory about Rossi being in love with Shiloh's mom and then killing her when she married someone else. And also there's this sinner at the Gene Co. company named Blind Meg who wants to leave the company even though she knows that they'll repossess her eyes if she does. And also there's some sort of indication that a character that we never meet is fighting against Gene Co. in order to make repossessions illegal. And also there's some sort of highly addictive painkiller called Zydrate that can be replicated using a substance that occurs in corpses, which is why drug dealers are all called grave robbers. And Amber Sweet is trying to put systems in place to help fight Zydrate addiction despite dealing with addiction herself. And also, Pavi Largo wears faces. And also, all of this is set to the backdrop of an extremely complicated universe that I'm still not convinced I explained properly. In case you can't tell, this movie is a little stuffed full of plot. If I could explain how this movie feels, it's almost like it was based on a long-running comic book series. Something with a lot of lore behind it that would make it difficult to pack into an hour-and-a-half long runtime. It didn't at all surprise me to discover that this movie is based off a play which was based off a play. It really feels like it's at least 3 times removed from the original concept. But why am I, in 2020, talking about this little-known Razzie Award-winning horror musical from 2008? Well, honestly, it's because this is one of my all-time favorite movies. To describe this movie as goth would be an understatement. It isn't just the clothes and the makeup. This is goth in the way that The Crow and Johnny the Homicidal Maniac are goth. It permeates every line and every plot point. This movie revels in the darkness and the weirdness of every little moment. I really can't think of any other movie like this. It's highly stylized, the music is great, the gore is gratuitous and convincing, but usually cartoony enough that it's easy enough to stomach. And the cast, well, endless, is usually pretty great with just a couple of exceptions. But this movie faced two major problems right off the bat. One, it was not made for a general audience. In the same way that I wouldn't recommend a Rob Zombie movie to everyone, I wouldn't recommend this movie unless you're a fan of weird cult movies. The other problem, besides the fact that in 2008, Paris Hilton was so hated that she kept audiences away in droves, was quite simply that Lionsgate refused to promote the title. It was to the point that Zdinich, Smith, and Bousman decided to go on tour to promote the film during midnight screenings. Something that they called Repo, Road Tour. Several members of the cast agreed to tag along to these screenings, setting up Q&A events after the showing. The movie was given a limited theatrical release, and it received middling to negative reviews from critics, who were caught up in how clear it was that this movie was not made for the mainstream. But over the past 12 years, the movie has gained a bit of a cult following. The creators have announced that at one point they planned to make both a prequel and a sequel, which would explain why so many plot points are introduced and go nowhere. They expected to be able to expand on this in later films. But the film underperformed at the box office and Lionsgate refused to fund the remaining movies. For years, different members of the cast teased that they might still make these movies if fans could just pool enough money together. But that dream kinda died when it was revealed that Smith, Zdinich, and Bousman had kinda lost their rights to the franchise. But that isn't to say that all hope is lost. In 2012, a number of people behind Repo the Genetic Opera, including Bousman and Zdinich, came together to make The Devil's Carnival. Another quirky horror musical with a much smaller budget and a much simpler story. Even Bill Moseley came back for that one. Sorry, I love Bill Moseley. It also has Emily Autumn, Ivan Moody, and if any of this is sounding cool to you at all, I would recommend checking that out. It's another beautifully styled movie with some great music, all with this horror fairy tale carnival theme. It's pretty great. So they actually have dialogue instead of that awkward speak singing that Repo did.
Please let me go.
If The Devil's Carnival is proof of anything, it's that the people behind Repo the Genetic Opera are actually very talented. They just needed more time to polish their skills and the right environment to allow their weird ideas to flourish. If anything, Repo the Genetic Opera is kind of a morality tale about what happens when cult filmmakers cross into the mainstream. They might be creative, talented, and passionate, but studios won't care if they can't sell to a general audience. You might disagree with me, but I'm gonna give Repo 9 face masks out of 10. Now, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and click that little bell thingy to get notified. Because next time, we're gonna talk about the worst movie I have ever seen.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
And trust me when I say that you won't want to miss that one. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and while you're down there, why don't you leave me a comment? Let me know what your favorite horror musical is. Thank you so much for watching, my pets, and I will see you next time. Love you.